All right, so in this one, we are going to be adding a user default preference for their shipping addresses. And we're not actually going to add it into the user address model. We're going to add it into a completely separate model that's going to be called user default address or default address user. So we'll do class user default addresses. And I'll do models.model. And the first thing we'll do is user. And I'll do models.foreign key. Oops, not that was an accident on autocorrect. Actually, instead of foreign key, I'll do one-to-one field. And we'll do settings.auth user model. Okay, so one-to-one field means that we can only have one. So now I'll do shipping equals to models.foreign key. And this is going to be, if you put it in quotes, it can use the model below it. Otherwise, this would have to go below it. So we'll do user address. And null can be true. And blank can be true. And then we are going to want to have another one for billing. And we will say define Unicode. Turn self.user.username. And I'll make that a string, just to ensure. Okay, so first off, what we're going to see is we're going to have an error here because we have two foreign keys on the same model with within the same model for the same model, right? So inside of the user default address, we have two foreign keys going to the same exact model. So we have to add another argument called related name. And this one I'll say user shipping default or user address shipping default. It's a little bit long, but we'll just go with that for now. And then the other one would be user billing or user address billing default. All right, so I'm going to use a slash here to separate the lines, make it a little bit cleaner. All right, so now we've got this billing and shipping information that we can have. So when we might want to have a signal for when our user creates a address, and then, or we might not. I mean, we don't actually have to do that, so we can just leave it as is for now. So now all I need to do is migrate the data. We'll do Python manage.py, schema, migration, accounts, auto, and then Python manage.py, migrate. All right, so if you didn't put that related name, an error would occur telling you that you have the same foreign key twice, basically, in one model. Okay, so now that we have this, we want to have another field that's going to indicate on our form whether or not it's the default. We don't need it in the model. We just need to have it indicated on our form. So in our views let's go to our forms first for the address form. And here we're going to say default equals to forms.boolean field. Okay, so now if we look at our actual form, refresh in here, now we see that it says default. I'm going to change it to being label equaling to default, or is this a default address? Or make default. How about that? So now we have this make default. All right, so we can select that. And now that we have this coming through on our form, in our address, let's go ahead and look into when we actually save the address. In this, we'll want to get that data, right? And the data is going to come through with the form. So we will go ahead and we'll just, first off, we'll print out, or we don't actually need to print out. We know what's going to happen. So is default will equal to form.cleaned data default. Sorry, not parentheses, but brackets like this. So if is a default, then we're going to set up our view for this person, or excuse me, the model for this person. So the user default address. We're going to get or create that. So we have to import it first into our view. Bring it to the very top. Models. So now down here, if default, we'll say default address and created equals to user defaults.address.objects.get or create user equals to request.user. Right? So if it's a default address, we're either going to get it or create it. Doesn't really matter if it's created because we are setting it every time we select that make default, we are setting it. So we're also going to have to think about it in terms of if this is default, what is it default for? Is it default shipping or default billing? So instead of make default, I'll just have two different ones that are going to be default shipping and default billing. Now this could start getting to be a little bit tricky. So I'm actually going to remove billing from the equation, at least from this form. So I'll call this make default shipping. And then when we render a billing form, it will say make default billing. So then we don't have billing in the form anymore. So let's go back into our forms and just get rid of billing from there completely. And then now this will be add new shipping address, even though it still says add address. And add, let's scroll up, add new shipping, putting that back, and then add shipping address. Okay, so now that we've got this, it's going to make a little bit more sense when we actually have a default shipping address. So now let's go back into our views. And since this is it, if it's default, we'll do shipping default address.shipping equals to new address, and then default address.save. All right, so what's happening here is we're going to create the default address, or at least a model of it, or we're going to get the one that exists, and then it's going to go and create the instance from the form that was just created, and it's going to save that new address here. This is not edit, this is just adding, right? So this is just creating a new user address. We can edit stuff later. So let's actually go ahead and test this out. And we're going to go back into our server here. And I'll say ABC drive, ABC, California, USA, 92660, some number. Okay, make default, add shipping. All right, so it has no object, oops. This should be objects. Little spelling errors like this can make you go crazy. So we refresh and submit. And notice it went away because we still have this added address is true. And then we actually added it twice. So that's something that we don't really want to do, but it was added twice because we submitted the form twice. And now one of these though is actually going to be the default address. So to clarify what our default address is, we're going to go into our checkout, and in the for loop for these radio buttons, we'll go, first off, let's actually take a look at the request.user default address.shipping. Do a little refresh in here, and we notice that it says all these different ones. So I'll say .id, and it says 8, the ID of 8. So now we can use if this is equal to address.id, we can say checked or selected. And notice that last bottom one is the one that was checked in this case. So that means that we can actually use this call right here to select our default value already checked, right? So it will already be checked. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're just going to go ahead and cut this, paste it in here. And now checked would equal to checked. Okay, everything looks good so far. The if clause will definitely be in there. That's okay. So if I refresh in here, now I have the correct one checked. So we can also say that it's the default value. So let's actually change between the two. I'm going to actually have two different types of inputs here, just if I want to style one. So the first one would be, I'm going to copy this, paste it in here, and I'm going to put this inside of this right here. And then we'll do checked equals to checked. And then we want to have an else clause in here, else. There we go. And again, we're showing the checked one. All right, so now we have our checked value. And of course, if we change it here, once we submit the form for the credit card information, it'll actually show up. So the same type of thing will happen when we do the billing address. So we can go ahead and copy this same thing here. And I'm just going to paste it down here and change these to billing address. And then this to billing. And right now, none of them are the default. So if I go into the admin and just create one as the default, gonna have to add it into the admin first. So into accounts or admin, and then user default address. And I'll just do admin.site.register. User default address, do a refresh, user default address, the first one, and billing, we can just choose an arbitrary one here. Go into products, checkout, and now we have our billing selected. So the way these forms are going to render are going to be slightly different once we actually add one for billing. But again, if we have default addresses, we aren't going to show this form. Especially if they have make default, right? We wouldn't show the form then in that case. And also this ordering is probably not the best. What I'd rather have is maybe ordered by the reverse of what it currently is, which is in the timestamp. So I'm going to go into my model here and go class meta ordering equals to, and we're going to do the negative updated, then the negative timestamp. So if the address is updated, so if it's going to be changed to being the default, then, or well, actually won't change, sorry. But if we change anything about the address, that one will come up top. The default one is going to just kind of lie on what default we selected for it. There would be a way to actually pull it out and do some different stuff with it, but we're not going to get too specific now because realistically you probably won't have even this many addresses at first, right? It'd be nice to have a ton of addresses that they're shipping to all the time, but it's likely that they'll just have these right here, and that's it. All right, so that's selecting our default. We're getting really close to actually having the ability to check out their credit card information and then go forward from there. And then also we want to add in the billing address form, just like what we did here. I know we kind of went back on that. It's only because as I started using it, I kind of rethought on what would be the best experience for the user. So as I'm using it, oftentimes I will experience it as a user would and go, this isn't making a lot of sense, so let's make it better. And that's important for you to actually go through and test these things out yourself and act as if your customer would, because then you find little things where this little billing and make default, those two check marks caused some confusion even for myself, like when I'm trying to add this. So instead, we can make buttons that are smarter for like add shipping and add billing. And perhaps we don't even have it show up like this. Maybe we have it show up as a modal, so then they can add it just only focused on adding their shipping, hit add shipping, and then bring them back into this area. But that's something we'll worry about as we finish this thing off and polish it as well. But now it's pretty cool. We've got our shipping, our billing. You could probably even figure out on your own at this point, you should be able to at least, is adding a billing address or changing our functions a little bit to making it a billing address. But other than that, like, it's pretty much the same, right? And then the credit card information is not a whole lot left. So that's something that we'll actually start to get working on here in the next few videos. All right, we'll see you soon.